over the last 2 years, we've learned a lot about how people are doing amazing work across Michigan to transform public safety and prevent incarceration. Most of our work and the learning community has focused on non-system related activities. What are people doing in community violence intervention to address problems before there's even a police call made? What are people doing in restorative justice efforts to not using the criminal legal system, find ways to reconcile when there has been harm? Things like that. For this February and March series, what we are doing is we're doing a little bit of a look at what are some of the system involved ways to address uh, public safety and prevent incarceration. Because as advocates, as practitioners, as community members, you have an important voice in helping shape those tools and making sure they are, if they're appropriate, they're being delivered well, and if there's problems, addressing that problems. And so I'm really excited for the panel we have this week. When we were looking at this issue, I kept turning back over and over again to the amazing research and other kinds of work that the Center for Behavioral Health and Justice does on this issue. When I wanted to look at what are some of the options local police and other system actors have to prevent jail time, I was always going back to CBHJ research and reports on issues. So they are an incredible resource that really looks at this issue deeply. And also Street Democracy doing work to say among the people who are some of the most vulnerable in our communities, people who are unhoused, there's a lot of contact with the criminal justice system, and a cell doesn't provide stable housing. So how do we actually make sure that their needs are being met? So that's what we'll be covering today. Michael will give a little bit more introduction of the specific panelists. In March, Sheba said next month. Well, you can tell she was ready to be done with this February dreariness. But in March, we're going to have another section specifically looking at some of the problem-solving courts, the drug courts, the veterans courts, things like that. On the one hand, they can be powerful ways to help people access the care they need. On the other hand, they can also be tools that further strengthen criminal legal system on things that aren't necessarily best resolved through crime and punishment. So we're going to have a really honest conversation with both a promoter and a critic of the way some of those problem-solving courts have been played out, so that, again, you as practitioners across the state are able to work within your own spheres of interest to make sure that that's going as well as possible. And then that'll kick us up to that April in-person connection system session that Sheba mentioned. So with that, I'm going to kick it back to Michael to introduce the panel.
We have three panelists: Charles Hobbs, attorney for Street Democracy, and then we also have two other panelists from the Center for Behavioral Health and Justice at Wayne State. Matt Larson, he is the Associate Professor and Director of Implementation for the Center for Behavioral Health and Justice. Matt is an Associate Professor who completed his PhD at Arizona State University. Prior to his graduate training, he was part of the United States Department of Education's McNair Scholars Program, a federal initiative centered on increasing the attainment of PhDs by students from historically underrepresented groups. His research has appeared in journals such as Criminology, Justice Quarterly, Journal of Criminal Justice, and Journal of Youth and Adolescence. And his work has been funded by the National Institute of Justice, National Science Foundation, and Public Welfare Foundation. Beyond Matt's research, he led Wayne State's adoption of the Inside Out program, prison exchange program, in 2006 at Detroit Reentry Center, and has supported the development of the university's first BA granting prison education program. And he is accompanied by Brittany Davis, who is the project coordinator for the Center for Behavioral Health and Justice. Now, Brittany is a little bit more near and dear to me. As I was reading her bio earlier, Brittany joined the Center for Behavioral Health and Justice in 2024 with a wealth of knowledge in several areas in the criminal legal system. During her undergraduate studies right here in Lansing at Michigan State University, she interned with the juvenile probation in Ingham County, which, like I said, is closely connected to my own experiences. She started her career as a youth worker in Eaton County Juvenile Center and Turning Point Youth Center. Brittany continued her career at Macomb County Community Corrections as their resource coordinator, diversion clinician, assisting individuals with release to substance use treatment from jail and communicating with courts across the state to monitor treatment compliance. She assessed and helped in release of individuals who were not appropriate for incarceration. Brittany later moved on to Michigan Department of Corrections, where she was a probation agent for 3 years in Macomb County, monitoring a specific caseload after 1 year. Always having a passion for wanting to aid in changing the criminal legal system from the inside out, she set out to move to another side of the justice system as a researcher with the CBHJ. So that is the credentials backing these two panelists.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael, for the kind introduction. I don't think there's anything else that I need to throw into the fold. I've been at Wayne State since 2014. I did my master's degree here in 2007, so I've been stomping around this part of Detroit for quite a while. I'm excited to be here presenting to everyone and partnering with Brittany and kind of highlighting the work that we do here at the CBHJ across the sequential intercept model. As I'll kind of walk through, much of the work that we have done since the center formed surrounds the sequential intercept model and the intervention points that are identified in that model. So I'm going to walk through kind of just a general overview today about what the SIM is and get into some specifics about what's happening at each of the intercepts and provide some context highlighting those intercepts with programs around the country that have met the threshold of being evidence-based practices or at least promising practices. Before I get into all of that, though, I'm going to situate the CBHJ's work in a broader reform, landscape, speaking to kind of the area and the niche that we occupy in the work that we do, which largely involves governments, but also community mental health and other partners. And so for this reason, I think the CBHJ is distinct from some of the organizations that I think are represented here on the call today. And so I want to speak to a bit about that. Next slide. So as it stands, CBHJ is currently doing work in 43 counties in both the upper and lower peninsulas. Currently, we have 26 projects that span those counties, and these projects currently bring in $6.5 million. We have a staff of 50 folks here at the CBHJ who are both within the Metro Detroit area, but also other counties throughout the state. Next slide. I'm going to hit you with our vision, mission, and purpose just to, again, situate who we are and what we do in our work. And so our vision is envisioning a society that prevents, deflects, and diverts people with behavioral health needs from the criminal legal continuum, making sure that they are connected to appropriate care settings as a means to ensure that we are pursuing optimal well-being for these folks. Next slide. Our purpose, as we imagine it in the words that we've come up with, are external facilitator of change who bring the complex behavioral health criminal legal intersection by fostering meaningful dialogue with our partners and the goal of ultimately advancing solutions that are effective and high impact across multiple settings spanning both the behavioral health and criminal justice systems. Next slide. Our mission is delivering actionable data, person-centered research and evaluation, and collaborative technical assistance at this continuum. And the goal, with the aim of ultimately empowering our partners to be able to facilitate and bring high-impact work to life. And so collectively, these three components, I think, are important to kind of CBHI's identity and how we imagine the work and the spaces that we want to occupy. Next slide. Before I transition into the breakdown of the SIM and kind of each of the intercepts and some of the promising work that's happening at those intercepts, I wanted to talk briefly about a little philosophy surrounding the CBHJ's approach. And I'm going to situate it in a broader conversation about reform as existing in a myriad of ways. And there's a talk that I had the opportunity to listen to in 2021 at the American Society of Criminology. Some of you might know the organization, might attend that annual meeting. It was a talk given by Daniel Nagin, who at the time was the president of ASC, and he was speaking to the complex landscape of criminal justice reform, and he likened it to an orchestra, and that each party, each group involved in criminal justice reform plays an integral part, and that reducing criminal justice reform to one philosophy or perspective or approach and negating those other approaches that are out there in the world is minimizing the ultimate impact that we can have as practitioners, researchers, advocates, and ultimately call for a more unified approach to criminal justice reform, where entities doing work across ultimately this continuum of reform stand to have a broader and more lasting and sustainable impact than they would on their own without consideration of those other people or those other organizations or philosophical approaches to reform. And so, as you all know, criminal justice reform is a deeply complex and multifaceted challenge that demands both immediate practical changes and bold visionary transformations. On one side, the abolitionist perspective urges us to dream and rethink the very foundations of our system. Abolitionists, like many of us on this call, argue that the traditional institutions of policing, courts, and corrections are so deeply flawed that working within them merely perpetuates cycles of harm. Instead, abolitionists call for dismantling these oppressive structures and replacing them with community-based models that prioritize restorative justice, healing, and, of course, support over punishment. In contrast, there are reform strategies that operate within and across existing systems, engaging law enforcement, engaging courts, and engaging corrections in collaborative efforts. In large part, this is the style of reform that guides the CBHJ's work, at least much of it. This approach recognizes that while systemic overhaul is both a necessary and admirable long-term goal, there remains an urgent need for short-term reforms that can more quickly reduce injustices, improve accountability, and alleviate pain. By fostering cross-system collaborations, our governmental and community-based partners can implement reforms that reduce harm, increase effectiveness, and build trust between communities and institutions. The value of employing multiple approaches lies in their complementary strengths. Abolitionist ideas push us to imagine a radically different future that could ultimately lead to a more equitable and compassionate society. Meanwhile, collaborative system-based reforms can deliver measurable improvements in the short term, easing the burdens on marginalized communities and setting the stage for deeper change over time. Ultimately, the CBHJ believes that the journey towards justice isn't about choosing one path over another, but rather integrating visionary ideals within practical systemic reforms. This dual strategy ensures that we address immediate needs while laying the groundwork for transformative changes that required for lasting social justice. Next slide. So many of you have probably seen this graphic. This is, in short, the sequential intercept model. As it stands, there are 6 intercepts. Originally, there were 5. In 2017, the SIM model was, which was born in 2006 officially, was updated to include Intercept 0, or community services. The SIM identifies opportunities for intervention to prevent deeper criminal justice involvement, in short, while linking people to behavioral health services and supports along the way. It's most helpful to think about each intercept that you see here as a chance or an opportunity to connect people with care rather than serving them to the grinder of punishment, if you will. The original SIM model, again, included 5 intercepts, ranging from community service or law enforcement to community corrections. The 6 added in 2017, I'll highlight now. Next slide. So community services leverages crisis services, first responder systems, and community-based resources to preempt justice system involvement. It really prioritizes early intervention by offering accessible behavioral health services, stable housing supports, and rapid crisis response, all of which are designed to address emerging needs importantly, before law enforcement engagement becomes necessary. There are many promising programs in this space. Perhaps most notably, one that receives a significant amount of attention in conversations like this one is CAHOOT, or Crisis Assistance Helping Out on the Streets. This program started in Eugene, Oregon, and it showed that behavioral health professionals can effectively respond to crisis calls without law enforcement presence in many situations. In 2023, they successfully responded to over 17,000 calls, with less than 1% requiring law enforcement backup, as an example of the effectiveness of the CAHOOTS model. Another model, the Arizona model, or the Crisis Now model, delivers a comprehensive crisis response system featuring 24/7 crisis call centers, mobile crisis teams, and dedicated crisis stabilization facilities. This model includes, importantly, a real-time bed registry to seamlessly coordinate care and has significantly reduced psychiatric emergency department admissions by 45% and inpatient psychiatric admissions by 40%. So we can see the impact of these models broadly. Next slide. Intercept 1 focuses largely on law enforcement, including 911 call systems and law enforcement policies and procedures more generally. This intercept centers on interactions between individuals and law enforcement during crisis events, emphasizing specialized responses and pre-arrest diversion opportunities. It focuses on training law enforcement officers to recognize that behavioral health needs and providing a menu of options to officers to connect people to appropriate services rather than making an arrest and starting that process of enmeshing people within the criminal legal system. As two examples of evidence-based programs, first is the Houston's Clinical Officer Remote Evaluation, otherwise known as the CORE program. And this pairs crisis intervention trained officers with mental health clinicians for real-time video consultation during crisis calls. Preliminary evidence suggests that 20% reduction in unnecessary arrests. If we extrapolate that across a city the size of Houston, that is a significant number of arrests involving people with mental health needs. In addition, there's a law enforcement assisted diversion program, or LEAD, which is originated out of Seattle. This program operates as a pre-booking diversion program for low-level drug and prostitution offenses, connecting individuals directly to case management services instead of jail. Program evaluation shows of this program that participants are 58% less likely to be arrested after enrollment compared to their similarly situated peers, demonstrating its overall effectiveness at breaking cycles of criminal justice involvement. All right, next slide. Intercept 2 focuses on initial detention and initial court hearings, specifically after arrest. And identifying opportunities for early diversion into treatment and into services that will help someone who, especially those who have behavioral health needs. This intercept often includes screening and assessment processes at jails and at courts that can identify individuals with behavioral health needs and quickly connect them to community-based alternatives to incarceration. As all of us on this call know, there's still much work to do here. There's many systems that still do a very poor job of identifying individuals with such needs. And so there's programs of this variety that this intercept points to that have shown to be very, very promising. One of those early programs is Miami-Dade's Criminal Mental Health Project, CMHP, which operates as a pre-trial diversion program, providing mental health screening and linkage to community-based treatment, with separate misdemeanor and felony tracks that maintain judicial oversight. This program reduces jail bookings, according to evidence, by 59% and days in jail by 80% for participants with serious mental illness, demonstrating significant benefits for both participants, but importantly, especially now in this political moment that we find ourselves, for the criminal justice system itself in terms of the cost savings and the efficiency that follows not having to house individuals with such complex needs. Secondarily, the Manhattan's Arraignment Diversion Program, MADP, provides a comprehensive screening and assessment at arraignment for behavioral health needs, offering immediate connection to community services as an alternative to detention. Having successfully diverted over 4,500 people, with 87% of participants appearing for subsequent court dates, the program maintains public safety while also effectively addressing individuals' behavioral health needs. Next slide. All right, so the third intercept of the SIM model focuses specifically on jails and courts. And the intercept broadly focuses on specialized courts, jail-based services, and alternatives to incarceration for people who've already entered the justice system. More specifically, this intercept includes human alternatives like mental health and drug treatment courts, humane alternatives, sorry, and like mental health and drug treatment courts, veterans courts are often included in that pool, and comprehensive jail-based services that meaningfully prepare individuals for successful community reintegration. Two examples here are the Bronx Community Solutions Program, which provides judges with meaningful alternative to jail and fines through a range of options, including community service, counseling, treatment readiness programs, job readiness training, and educational services. This approach has reduced the use of jail sentences by 30% in the Bronx's criminal courts, addressing underlying issues while maintaining accountability for those who find themselves entering the system at this early point. Additionally, the Stepping Up initiative, which Brittany is going to dive into next, funded by the BGA in partnership between the National Association of Counties, Council for State Governments, and American Psychiatric Association, is a long-standing program, again, that Brittany will talk more about, that was born in 2015 and has really helped counties implement standardized behavioral health screening instruments in jails, helping identify the people who have mental health needs coming in. All right, next slide, please. Intercept 4 of the SIM focuses specifically on reentry. And this intercept includes attention to transition planning from incarceration to community, facilitating successful reintegration by ensuring a seamless continuum of care between both correctional settings and community services. It addresses essential needs. And by that, I mean medication management, treatment access, stable housing, and of course, benefits enrollment, so as to help reduce the risk of recidivism during this important and vulnerable period right after release. As examples of promising programs in this space, one that is often referred to, and I'm referred to now, is a critical time intervention program, or CTI. It's a time-limited case management model designed specifically for the transition from institutions to community and provides decreasing intensity of support over a 9-month period, while connecting people to long-term community supports during that time. CTI participants, research shows, experience 61% fewer homeless nights, 61% reduction in psychiatric rehospitalization, and roughly 30% reduction in rearrests compared to those who are exposed to standard services. So considering those numbers collectively, it's a high impact program that has really borne out cost savings as well as savings to the stress that's placed on the systems dealing with people with these needs. In addition, Returning Home Ohio, from our neighbor down south, or RHO, provides pre-release engagement and permanent supportive housing and wraparound services for people who have behavioral health needs and are exiting prison. Program evaluation has shown that participants were 40% less likely to be rearrested and 61% less likely to be reincarcerated for a new crime. Again, compared to the similarly situated counterparts who are not entering into this program, highlighting the value overall of this. So if we push pause and we think about the numbers I've thrown at you through Intercept 1 or Intercept 0 through Intercept 4, these aren't negligible percent reductions in the outcomes that all of us are working towards. These are meaningful reductions, upwards to 60% or 80% in some of the cases I referred to. And so we need to kind of take stock of that. I think too often we lose sight of the fact that these are just remarkable changes to systems that have obviously impacted people in ways that are very harmful. So if we can get close to achieving those numbers locally, it's essential to try to bring these programs to life in whatever ways possible. I also want to give a shout out to Nation Outside's Tippler program, another reentry-based program, hopefully going to be able to add itself to the existing list of evidence-based practices here over the next couple of years. Next slide. Last, community corrections. So this intercept focuses on specialized community supervision strategies for people with behavioral health needs on probation or parole. It balances supervision requirements with tailored treatment interventions by utilizing dedicated caseloads, collaborative supervision models, and flexible conditions that address the unique challenges posed by behavioral health disorders in particular. So I did my PhD at Arizona State University. When there, I worked with Maricopa County Specialized Mental Health Probation folks, and this program features officers with reduced caseloads who work exclusively with people who have serious mental illness, or SMI, integrating mental health treatment needs with supervision requirements. Participants have been shown to be 36% less likely to have new criminal charges compared to standard probation, highlighting the effectiveness of specialized supervision approaches that address these needs and that take seriously the implications of large caseloads. In addition, and lastly, Hawaii's opportunity probation with enforcement, or the HOPE program, implements a swift, certain, and fair approach to violations, focusing on immediate, predictable, and proportionate sanctions rather than delayed, severe consequences. The program's structured approach has reduced positive drug tests by 83% and new arrests by 55% compared to standard probation, which also again demonstrates clear expectations and consistent responses that can improve outcomes among individuals who are on probation or parole. So broadly considered, this is what the SIM model is. And these are some of the programs that have been born through the framework and its adoption by partners in a whole variety of areas. Brittany is going to talk next about one of the initiatives that we have here at the CBHJ called Stepping Up.
Thank you, Matt, for that thorough presentation on the SIM. I'm going to talk a little bit at Intercept 3 moving forward, but let's get into what Stepping Up is. You can go to the next slide. So Stepping Up is a national initiative. The goal is to reduce the number of individuals with mental illness and co-occurring disorders in county jails. It establishes and encourages cross-system collaboration. So we looked at Intercept 0 to 6, and so we're looking to have individuals all across those intercepts come together to collaborate to reduce incarceration. And it prepares communities to build out services that support with the reduction in incarceration. So currently in the United States, there's 582 counties, as you see in the map here, that have signed the Stepping Up resolution. In order to sign a Stepping Up resolution, the county commissioner has to sign, and there has to be buy-in in the community. But we're going to get into a little bit about what's happening in our own communities here in Michigan. You can go to the next slide. So there are 32 counties in Michigan that have passed the Stepping Up resolution. Of those 32 counties, the Center for Behavioral Health and Justice has provided technical assistance to 18 of those counties. And so when you get into signing a Stepping Up resolution, you have buy-in, obviously, because the resolution is signed, but we've seen that community partners struggle because of the insufficient data that hinders their ability to properly identify that target population with SMI, and it hinders them from implementing the appropriate system-wide response, which is where we come in. We noticed that if we provide the data and the opportunity for them to target that population, that we can see benefits in identifying and providing that support. And so we're funded by the Mental Health Diversion Council for the state of Michigan, and we can provide technical assistance of no charge to counties that have signed that resolution in Michigan. Next slide, please. All right, so we went over the SIM model in the previous presentation. I want to highlight that Stepping Up works in the third intercept with the jails. And although we're heavily based at Intercept 3, again, we encourage our county partners at all intercepts to be active in stepping up when we're in their counties. The national model of Stepping Up recognizes that what is going well or not well at one intercept impacts the next intercept. And so that's why we find it important to have different individuals from different agencies working together. So before participating in Stepping Up, there has to be buy-in at the county level with the sheriff, the jail staff, and the local CMH and behavioral health providers. At the beginning of engaging with our community partners, we sit down at the table, we discuss their current jail processes, their successes, their challenges, and their future goals for their county. And we're able to do process mapping. What that does is it gives the county a realistic visual of what's actually taking place in their jail, from the time that the person is booked to the time to they're released, even down to the time of the specific time that they're released. And is that beneficial for individuals that have struggles with mental health? Can they get the connection to care that they need, that they might have received in the jail? So we sit down and we give that process map to them to where we can establish goals. Next slide, please. So what do we address while we're doing our technical assistance? We address jail bookings and prevalence, which has the goal to reduce the prevalence of individuals with SMI and co-occurring disorders who are booked into jail. We address the average length of stay with the goal to shorten that length of stay for individuals with SMI and co-occurring disorders. We address the connections to care with the goal to increase that connection to treatment in jail and following release. And then we address recidivism, which is just the goal to reduce recidivism to the county jail. And so how do we retrieve the data surrounding these areas. We use the Kessler-6 screening and the ROD screening, and ROD stands for the Rapid Opioid Dependency Screenings. These screenings are valid for men and women. And so what we have found is that often jails are only screening for suicide risk, which leaves, which leaves those with mild to moderate mental illness overlooked. And the problem with that is that if you overlook someone that has mild to moderate mental health issues, then they could likely spiral or, have a negative experience while incarcerated. And now you've overlooked them and you haven't seen them. Well, with the Kessler-6, which is a valid screen, it kind of does a more in-depth look so that we're not missing those individuals. It also helps to highlight SMI in women, specifically African-American women who are normally overlooked with a non-validated screen. And so we also do training on how to administer that screening to gain trust of individuals, right? Because the last thing that people want to do is fill out a screen that might they might think that it's going to get them into more trouble. And so we talk to the officers in those counties on how to administer those screens and kind of giving them training on how to present them so that so individuals know that they're actually helping the system by filling out this screen. So we take the data that's collected and we're able to communicate to the county how many individuals are entering their jails that have SMI or co-occurring disorders, how many people receive services, and how long it took them to receive those services from booking. Also, how long individuals with SMI and co-occurring disorders were incarcerated. Next slide, please. So what's accomplished during technical assistance? I'm the project coordinator for one of the project coordinators for Stepping Up. And so what we do is regular coordination and support throughout the TA process. So that looks like me speaking to the sheriff and the jail admin, mental health providers during the time of technical assistance, which could last anywhere from 9 to 15 months, checking in, seeing what's going well. We also do a development of the mission, vision, short and long-term goals related to jail diversion efforts with the assistance of our strategic planner. And then we do a guidance on development of a formal advisory board to sustain our efforts beyond where we're involved. And so that advisory board can include the sheriff, the jail administrator, corrections, courts, behavioral health, and SUD providers. It can include prosecutors and defenders, and it can also grow depending on the goals of that specific county. Next slide. So what are we doing to sustain? Like I mentioned that we want to make sure that the counties are continuing to doing the work after we leave. And so we look at exploration of opportunities for pre and post booking diversion and deflection for individuals with mental illness and substance misuse. And so that pre-booking is important. So for example, if you have a county that's a rural county, they likely don't have a city police department. And so we're likely already in the sheriff's office with their local agency. And so we can look at how we can prevent booking individuals with SMI. We look at the consideration of benefits of early deflection and diversion, including appropriate pathways to treatment and reduced use of jail space and resources. We look at recommendations for working with local emergency departments to mitigate wait times and barriers. And then we look at guidance on different law enforcement training. We also look at connection to other Stepping Up counties. And so if you have a neighboring county, we encourage them to speak and to get to know one another, to let them know what's going well, what challenges they're having, so that they can come together to come up with solutions for their own county. Another thing that is good for pre and post booking is we offer familiar faces. And so law enforcement often are frustrated with the frequent booking of the same individuals. And so we can provide the data to help those systems understand what preventative measures they can take pre-booking to address that. Next slide, please. So let's talk about some success stories that we've had. We have been able to really encourage counties to embed that Kessler-6 and ROD screen into their system. And so it's become a part of their jail booking process. It's also been able to be a part of some policies that they're writing for their jails. And so some counties have been able to flag those individuals with SMI immediately at booking, so they're not having long wait times for connection to care. We've also been able to demonstrate a need in smaller counties that don't have those resources for additional funding. And so they're able to get more grant funding. They're able to pass county millages. They're able to support the implementation of more programming and more services. And they're able to get more budget allocation from their Board of Commissioners. And then lastly, we've been able to expand diversion efforts across the SIM. So what that looks like is that sometimes we have counties who identify a goal before while we're at the table talking about stepping up. And so we're able to identify maybe they'll be good for our crisis response initiative. And so at the end, we're able to recommend and connect them with crisis response. And so we've been able to really help counties get specific goals for their communities in order to connect them with additional initiatives. Next slide. So yeah, that is stepping up, and thank you for your time.
Can't hear you, Michael.
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Perfect. My voice was a little sketchy at first, and anyway, so thank you for that, Brittany, and thank you, Matt, as well. In the spirit of staying on point with time, I'm just gonna move forward to Charles of Street Democracy, because I really would like to hear from him. So let me read a little bit about his bio, because this was very interesting to learn about. I was not familiar with Street Democracy. So Charles graduated from Cooley Law School in 2014. During and after law school, he worked as a law clerk for Legal Services of Youth of South Central Michigan, and also represented K-12 students at their suspension and expulsion hearings for the Student Advocacy Center, SAC. Charles went on to help train advocates for disciplinary hearings and currently serves as a supervising attorney for the SAC Student Representation Project. Since 2016, Charles has been an attorney at Street Democracy, a nonprofit focused on poverty-related issues. There, he provides criminal and civil legal services to homeless veterans and serves as defense counsel for Detroit's 36 District Court's Homeless Court, Street Court. Charles also spearheaded its education project advocating for school discipline reform. Man, thank you, Chuck, for all of the work that you have done and are and continue to do. I guess moving right in, tell us the group a little bit about yourself from your perspective, and then we'll go from there.
Yep. Thank you, Michael. I'm happy to be here, and very good to be able to hear all that information from my fellow panelists. That was great. Thank you. So yeah, like he said, I've been an attorney at Street Democracy since 2016. Street Democracy's mission is really focused on the elimination of poverty. How we go about doing this is by direct representation to homeless folks, as well as using that information or using that direct representation to inform our policy and law reform activities. So Street Democracy was first founded in 2008 by Jayesh Patel. He basically, well, as he put it, he had a desire to help eliminate poverty, and with the help from his very understanding wife, as he puts it, he set out with a portable picnic table and visited the parks where unhoused people were known to hang out. He provided civil legal services for about 2 years. Doing that time, he found that the biggest issue that these people were facing was criminal matters, trying to get their driver's licenses back. So he's kind of shifted gears and found to try and find a way to address those issues. And what he came up with was the model for what's now called Street Outreach Court Detroit. It is based off of the homeless court model that there's about 23 homeless courts across the country, created by Steve Binder in San Diego, out of the veteran standoff events. So we tweaked that model just a little bit. So how we go about doing it, how we tweaked it really is that street court in Detroit is a no plea court. So meaning that any unadjudicated cases or open cases are at the end of it are dismissed outright, and any civil infractions they're vacated and closed with improvement. Fines and fees are wiped away. How participants get this relief is by completing what we call their action plan. So in order to create that action plan, what we've done is we've partnered with a number of community partners, including Detroit at Works, Volunteers of America, My Side, the PATH program, and there's a bunch more that I'm missing, but we've with several community organizations to help provide these resources to these people. Their action plan is to improve their housing, their health, and their income. So those are the three areas that we focus on. The first thing that we have them do, though, is create a vision statement for themselves, so that they can have an understanding of where they want to be, and we can help them actualize that vision, through providing them with the correct resources and opportunities. So all the action plans include that vision statement, as well as a plan to improve their housing, whether it be applying for a HUD-VASH voucher, or applying for subsidized housing, whatever that might be, as well as job training. We partner with a number of organizations, like I said, Detroit at Works, to help them find not only free job training, but also to get them employment services, putting together, resumes and finding and connecting them with employers. We also, excuse me, that action plan also includes usually an education component. A lot of our participants need a GED. We've also had, we've not just limited to that though, we've had a lot of participants that have started going to college. A lot of participants that have an entrepreneurial spirit, and they've opened up their own businesses. So the whole idea here is to give these individuals, one, treat them with dignity, and provide them opportunities, in the hopes of not only reducing recidivism, but also to uplift the community itself. And so since 2012, is when they first started it. It took about 2 years for JS and Street Democracy to organize enough people, such as the Detroit Action Commission, even the help of some pastors who had judges in their congregation with applying a little bit of pressure. We were able to get 36th District Court to open up street court. And it's unique in that it's not the traditional setting of a courthouse. We actually hold the actual hearings at Capuchin Soup Kitchens. So the judge, the prosecutor, and myself, and even a bailiff will show up, and we hold court right there at the soup kitchen. So it provides a safe place for them to come, provides them with a positive experience as well. So yeah, a couple of stats about that. Since 2018, we've had 1,121 participants. We've closed over 12,413 cases. And one statistic that I don't typically share, but after looking at the roster of the audience, I think it's safe to share it, is that we've successfully waived $1.7 million in fines and fees for these folks. And what that does is that, it's helped them get that driver's licenses back. It's helped them provide with the resources to improve their position in those three areas that I spoke about. And born out of street court was really this idea of what we call functional sentencing. And functional sentencing is just the acknowledgement that traditional fines and fees and incarceration don't necessarily get at the root causes of this behavior. And so we actually started a pilot program in 31st District Court in Hamtramck. We did that for a year, and we studied the data of people that we basically gave them a street court-like action plan, and at the end of it, we analyzed some of the data. And some of the data, we found that 59% of the people that were given the standard traditional fines and fees, they experienced housing instability. compared to 33% that were given a functional sentence. So it reduced, that risk of having housing instability. And 57% of those participants reported improved incomes as well. So what we're trying to do now is we're trying to apply this theory of functional sentencing to across all gambits of these diversion, I guess, like impacts on courts. So it could be what we're doing right now is we're developing an app that the participant can use to create their vision statement, create their action plan, and also provide them with the resources right there in one place, they can complete that action plan. And that action plan also will provide a way for them to, the app will provide a way for them to actually show the proof, that they did these, that they completed that step of the action plan. And then that data can be used by courts, by prosecutors, by even the law enforcement on the streets, to show that that they to use it as an alternative to incarcerating them or providing them with or giving them tickets that and them fines and fees as well. So I know we are a little bit pressed on time, but I think that's is kind of what we've done in a nutshell. And so yeah, I'll turn it back over to you, Michael.
Appreciate that. So there are actually a couple of questions in the chat that I wanted to get to before I go ahead and get to my question. So I'll allow that. One question from, is it Ariel? Leave it.
Ariel, yes.
Ariel, did you want to ask your question, Ariel? Did you want me to go ahead and read it for you?
You can go ahead and ask it.
Okay. Are unhoused folks that have SUD able to participate in street court as well? Would they be referred to 36 districts drug or sobriety court instead?
Yeah, so we do, yes, they absolutely can be. We've devised those, like I said, we devised those action plans around the needs of the participant. So we've had, if they have these drug issues or substance abuse issues, we include that as part of their action plan, whether it be, doing, IOP treatment or even residential treatment. Sometimes we're able to help with that. Just really is dependent upon those folks' their needs. But yes, they absolutely can.
Thank you so much. Could you tell us how they're referred to the street court as well?
Yeah, so we don't take, Street Democracy doesn't take referrals from the general public. However, they do come through our providers, our community providers. And if you look on our website, streetdemocracy.org, you'll see a list of providers that we have available. And we also, the way that we wrote the MOU with the court is that we can onboard any other organizations that are willing to do this work too. So we get it through there. We also have a lot of referrals straight from the judge at 36 District Court, or the judges rather. There's not a week that goes by that we're not called in at least a few times to help them with a referral through the program and qualify them.
Thank you so much. Will you have your email address listed in case we have any other questions? This is really valuable information.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I'll put it in the chat right now.
So, since I didn't see a follow-up question to that one, I did want to ask mine. Recognizing that like poverty and lack is a large part of the root of crime, right? What cues or what things can be taken from the Street Democracy playbook and applied maybe to other communities dealing with adjacent issues?
Yeah, we believe that this functional sentencing can be applied to any offenses that are out there, and it can definitely be utilized by we get, as soon as we get this app off the ground, it can definitely be a good, easy, turnkey way for communities to participate in functional sentencing. But yeah, if there are groups out there that are looking to set something up in their community, we'd be happy to talk.
Sir. At this time, the floor is open for anyone who would like to ask questions. You can either place your question in the chat or you can raise a hand and myself, Jen, or Chuck will get you called on.
We've got one in the chat there, Mike.
I was just about to go to it. I'm kind of debating whether or not to bring this discussion that has been happening with Chuck also to the rest of the group to hear about. So let me introduce that, and then let me get to the next question that was there, and then I'll bring that back up. I don't see providers on the Street Democracy website. Can you talk more about the providers and how they engage or how to engage?
So yeah, I'm sorry about that. JS has been overhauling our website, so it may not. I haven't. It's been just a couple of days since I've looked at it, but I'm happy to get those lists to anybody that would like them. Please just email me and I can get those to you.
I think this question is actually was formed from CBHJ, the conversation with CBHJ, but Chuck wrote it in the chat. Support for people post-incarceration is undoubtedly needed, but I've seen a lot of questioning on the data on the value of supervision. Does that data back up checking in with POs, drug tests, etc.? And that question, I think, would be directed to my CBHJ folks.
Yeah, so our Dean Kubiak, who's the head of our of the CBHJ, she had to jump off, but she did respond in saying that post-incarceration support, it can include many things. If we only think about parole supervision, it can act like more of a surveillance that increases a return to prison. But programs that support employment, housing, and provide services associated with mental health and substance use can be preventative in decreasing that return.
Gotcha. Thank you. In the group, are there any other questions that kind of popped up in this conversation so far? Sorry, I'm just kind of flicking through everybody trying to see that I make sure I don't miss hands up. No questions right now. Well, I actually have a question, and it's more of a prompt, I guess. And that is, since CBHJ is together, can you guys give an example, and then I'll toss it over to Charles, of a success story that you've seen that like motivates you to keep going? And I see, hold on just a second, I see Booker T at Michigan Liberation with their hand raised. So go ahead, Booker T, you got a question, bro? Find you. Okay.
Okay, now it's working.
There
I
you
was in
go.
cyberspace for a minute. How's that? Hey, Chuck. Hey, Jen. Hey, how y'all doing?
Pretty good, pretty good.
I was trying to get some last minute things done, and so I'm here though. Anyways, I wanted to know, for the people who are being accepted into the program, who is paying for the tethering and who is paying for the drug testing? Because oftentimes you find people who are in these struggles who aren't able to even pay for diapers or barely making it to pay their rent and whatever, and struggling, but they still have to pay for those things. Who's paying for that? Are there ways that they can get assistance in those areas?
Is that a question for Street Democracy? It sounds like.
Yep.
Okay.
So we don't typically. I'm not sure that I'm the best person to answer this. We don't typically. If we don't require drug testing or those sorts of things with street court. If it is, part of it, I know that we have partnered with the drug court sometimes, and I believe that they do have resources that to do that. But we don't usually typically, I mean, we typically deal with low, misdemeanors and civil infractions. So there's not a tether involved in most of these offenses, or those sorts of things. So.
Well, I do know a person that I was helping, one of the people, and she was up under the probation, but probably not under your program, but she was required to pay. And they were on like where they have numbers that are pulled or whatever. And so I find that a lot of times when we are seeing less use of abuse in one area, I can say, with ending mass incarceration, and now we're coming into the area where people are being tethered, probation, and you're looking at other options, but there's still extreme costs.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you on that. And unfortunately, that's just the state of our system right now. I've, with my work with the veterans, going to other jurisdictions and seeing some of this, the costs that are involved. I absolutely agree that there needs to be some sort of relief because, putting them on probation and giving them that come along with these costs, is also just deepening that cycle of poverty.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Question for all the panelists. What advice would you give to local organizers, advocates, and service providers in Michigan who are trying to prevent jail stays in their communities?
Yeah, for specifically stepping up, just knowing who your county commissioners are, knowing who you're voting into the sheriff's office and what their goals are to reduce incarceration, if any, knowing if your county commissioner has subcommittees that you can get involved in, finding a champion in your community that wants to have this goal and connecting them with the county commissioner to get the resolution passed if it's not already passed. And if you want to know if the resolution is passed, you can go to the Stepping Up National website. I'll put it in the chat. That way you can see if your current county has participated or if they have a resolution already signed.
My advice is simply just to make some noise. That's what we had to do in order to get street court organized. We organized actually the folks that were at the shelters, the Capuchins and some other shelters. And that's how we started help them start the Detroit Action Commission. And in order to get street court started, they stormed the city county building and sat outside offices of officials until they listened to them. We also applied pressure through other avenues too. Just keeping at it, that persistence of showing up and and telling people about it. So yeah, that'd be my best advice, is just to make as much noise as you can.
Definitely appreciate that. Sometimes that's the best move. When there's no moves, just make noise, draw attention to the issue. Yeah, I appreciate that. Any other questions from the group that need to be highlighted for our panel before we move forward? Okay. Not a very inquisitive group today, huh? Either that or our panelists have answered a lot of questions without the need to be asked.
I have another question. I just didn't want to take up a lot of time if we didn't have time available.
Still got a little bit of time.
Okay, so Charles, if you could, and I don't want to just keep coming at you with a lot of questions, but like, could you give us like maybe just like a small example of like John Doe comes through the program? Like, does John Doe work with a case manager? Is there assistance with transportation for the housing? Like, how exactly, could you just give us like maybe an example of a scenario?
Sure. So I guess, so the average person comes to street court having at least 12 open matters at 36th District Court. That's the average. How we identify them is through these community providers where, where they're open to the public, and these folks come in and they help identify them through their means of their different programs. Luckily, right now, the city of Detroit is putting some, quite a bit of money into job training and opening, actual centers where people can go into. So we identify a lot of folks that way as well. Once they are identified, then we actually train these community providers to develop the action plan with the participant. So we provide that training to them. They help them with those areas. We do have, we also, collate all of the resources that are available to these community providers that, maybe not be accessible to them in-house, but there's, another provider that does provide a service. So it usually takes about 90 days for them to complete this. And then, like I said, at the end of it, their fines and fees are waived and their cases are dismissed. Did that help, or did?
Yes, that was helpful. I guess I was just wondering, like, for our participants, we have like specific case managers that like pick them up, take them to, Secretary of State and like help them get their license back. Are you guys just like referring them out to agencies that will help with that? Or does the actual street court have case managers that work one-on-one with each participant?
Yeah, so we do have a director of client services that does, coordinate amongst the providers as well as take care of our judicial referrals directly. And so with the community providers, in order for them to be a part of street court added as a provider, they have to go through that training to, to be able to create those action plans. But it's and well, I guess as part of that, they do have dedicated caseworkers to street court, and they'll utilize, and that's how they interact with them. As far as like transportation and those sorts of things, the different things that they need, I can't really speak to that a whole lot. It is just very, it just depends on the community provider.
Thank you so much, Charles.
Yep.
And I saw a hand raised from Neil Hearns, is up at Michigan Live. You want to jump in?
Yes. I just wanted to talk about, since some of this discussion is talking about recidivism, I do believe. I wanted to say that, cash bail, it really fuels the cycles of incarceration, and wrongfully convicted people sometime, they are coerced or they accept plea bargains and stuff like that. And, to avoid these really indeterminate sentences, these pretrial sentences. So my question is like, shouldn't we all be trying to really, really rally around ending cash bail in our state? I oversee the In Cash Bail campaign at Michigan Liberation. And we know, I also oversee our Michigan Black Mama Bailout, and many of these people are incarcerated for lengthy times, 28 days before they go and, before the court, 28. And ultimately, all charges are dismissed, okay? They've lost their job. They have lost their vehicles. And in one case, they lost their children. This is very important. And I just really wanted to highlight, when we're talking about recidivism, we're talking about people that may cop pleas even in cases just to avoid what I just described. So we are essentially fueling this economy, this big, massive economy of fielding people as laborers, incarcerated people. And we need to step up, and we need to do something about it. We need to, this is just beyond us. We need to collaboratively come together, just as all of us are in this space, and find ways to fight this. We tried legislatively, we were unsuccessful, and now we're trying a county by county approach. But this is so big, and we're talking about driving with a suspended license. We're talking about a tail light. We're talking about mamas and dads who are afraid and they plead guilty. So I know I don't want to, take this into a different direction, but when we're talking about recidivism, let's really be conscious that recidivism also involves people that are coerced or feel compelled to say, I know I'm innocent, but I'm going to do this just so I could get back home to my kids or just so I retain a job, employment. So I'm complete. Thank you.